Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Januszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Our straight line perfect weather has just been continuing. I'm just kidding. We've
Yeah.
had fours record rainfall in New York City, and it's sunny and 75 out there today, and we might have record temperatures getting close to it, 80 or plus tomorrow and Wednesday. But it's been quite a year, but October's getting off to a good start.
It is. And of course, we're kicking off the fourth quarter of the year. We're starting to wrap up the year already. So today we are going to talk about your goals. It's at this point of the year, we should be looking at, first of all, looking back at January and saying, well, what goals did we set for this year and how close are we to accomplishing them? And we should be starting to look at the next year and what our goals are going to be for there. So we're going to talk about setting them and achieving them.
Yeah, obviously this is a great time of the year to do it. And I think one of the keys that we're going to talk a lot about today is to keep the goals themselves simple. Obviously, you might have a major goal, but you have to set a lot of sub goals and map them out timing wise and so on and so forth to make that happen. And so it's really, really important. And I was doing my research because I knew I had a book buried somewhere that I'd read a long time ago about this subject. But Darren Hardy, who is Success Magazine, he wrote a book in 2012 called The Compound Effect. And basically, a one sentence summary that I read on Amazon said the compound effect will show you why big, abrupt changes rarely work and how you can change your life over time with the power of small daily steps, a routine that builds momentum, and the courage to break through your limits when you reach them. So it's a great book. And basically, lesson number one is when you come up with a new life goal, immediately turn it into a daily habit. And basically, the way you do that is by breaking it into tiny little pieces that you can do and practice one day at a time. And we've talked about this as far as other things go, like the miracle morning and things like that. And then once you have that daily habit going, if you can just create a routine that you can stick to so you don't lose your momentum, because once you get it going, that's great, but you got to keep that going and then use your momentum to push the limits as you hit them, because the more you have that momentum going, when you trip up a little bit, you're going to keep it going. So those are like the three major lessons to that, but I'll be going in through some of the how-tos as we're going through this, as I can work them in.
Yeah, and it's, breaking it down into small steps. We talk a lot about this for various reasons. What's so important is what David Allen of Getting Things Done calls next actions. And the big problem that most people have when they set their goals is they're this amorphous thing. And you need to break it down into actual steps you can take to get there. So figure out what that next action is. And the reason it's so important is because, as you said, big changes tend to fail because there's no such thing as one big leap. It's always a lot of little steps. When you take that leap, if you don't make it, you're stuck. There's nowhere else to go. When you take the small steps, you move. And as you said, you build that momentum. And that's what's so important.
Yeah, and we talk all the time. I mean, a big leap is a big leap. We talk all the time about the only thing we have is the present moment. And there's no such thing as a big leap in the present moment unless you're long jumping or something like that. It's so important to understand that that's where we are. And if you can simplify that, it's a lot easier said than done, but just understand that in your mind, it will make things easier. Another great book that we've talked about before is called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and it talks about the same thing. But what he also talks about in that book, and what we need to talk about, obviously, this is kind of like a podcast that a lot of people were listening to for their businesses. but you have to sit down and write down goals for every aspect of your life. You take out a sheet of paper and just write down what are your goals for your health, for personal development, your professional goals. Obviously, whatever you do professionally is going to actually facilitate everything else that you got going. Finances are important, relationships, recreation, life in general, all these things. It's really, really important to just take out a sheet of paper and write them down. And what I recommend doing is doing it on a spreadsheet where you can just write them down and just kind of sort them by personal development, by professional, by finances, by life in general, and so on and so forth. And then the next thing you need to do is prioritize them and set them into daily actions by setting up the sub goals. So step number one, obviously, when it comes to goals, is to define them, but then you got to get yourself organized. And once you have that there and put in the work up front and you start developing those habits and keep to them, you're going to have a really, really good jump start on. And it's only October now, so you can really be cruising by next New Year. So the New Year's resolutions can be simple.
Right. And it's important to keep in mind what categories are important to you. So those goals can be financial, professional, family oriented, relationships, spiritual. Figure out what is important to you and then have your goals match those categories. One, that makes it easier for you to improve your entire life holistically. This way you're moving forward, but also it gives you balance. Because you have goals in all of those categories that are important to you, you're in a better frame of mind. You're more motivated because, again, these are important to you. You're not just choosing random categories that somebody wrote in the book. You're choosing the ones that motivate and are important to you and your life. And that changes from person to person. So you really have to think about it and say, what sections are important to me? And how can I improve each of them?
Yeah, and as time goes on and you start practicing this, your priorities as far as what your goals are important to you are probably going to change too once you've accomplished this and once you've accomplished that. But again, the main thing is getting started. In the book, The Compound Effect, he talks about goal designing. And there are 3 tips that he has there. The first one we already talked about. Don't just think it, ink it. Put it down on paper. Basically, Napoleon Hill said, reduce your plan to writing. The moment you complete this, you will have definitely given concrete form to the intangible desire if you have that on paper. Then number 2, which is a really, really great tip, which I had totally forgotten about, is suspend reality. Pretend it is only a game. Play in fantasy for a while. Let the giant that lay dormant inside you out to play and have fun doing that. And Albert Einstein said the same thinking that has led you to where you are is not going to lead you to where you want to go. So if you get into fantasy land a little bit and start dreaming and again, writing down things, how-tos and so on and so forth, it helps out a whole lot. And then number 3 is think big. Just give yourself permission to dream big, risk big. There's nothing that you can't accomplish if you put your mind to it. So what's your calls it your BHAG? What's your big, hairy, audacious goal?
So. Absolutely. When we talk about designing goals, I very often break things down into 3 segments. Your initial goal. This is the minimum goal that's going to make you happy. In Agile, they refer to this as the minimum viable product. You'll be happy there, but it's not the whole goal. That's really the starting point. The second point in designing the goal should be a SMART goal. And we've talked about this before. SMART is an acronym, stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So that's the second goal. And it has to be specific. You can't just say, I'm going to lose weight. You have to say, I'm going to lose X number of pounds. Make it measurable. Otherwise, how do you know when you've achieved the goal? Achievable. It should be, this is where it says to be a realistic goal, something that can be done. Relevant goes back to the categories that we talked about, and time bound is you have to give it a deadline. When are you going to achieve this by? The third part of the goal is what Chip was just referring to as the big hairy audacious goal. I usually refer to it as a moonshot goal. This is where you don't know if you can get that far, but why not try? Because even if you get close, you've blown away the other two goal levels. So yeah, aim for that moonshot, that big hairy audacious goal, because you never know. And very often people have a tendency to underestimate what they are capable of. So by having that stretch goal, that moonshot, you push yourself further than you thought you could go, and you learn more about what you're actually capable of.
Yeah, and the key is, just as you said, is to get started. I mean, obviously, an initial goal and ticking off this and that is great, but the SMART goals are where it really starts to get going, and this is where you need to get organized. And basically, what you need to do, if it's going to be measurable, it has to start by being written. And if it's achievable, it means that you're going to have to do it in small steps, because it's not going to happen all at once. I mean, these things, we're stating really the same thing in many, many different ways, but that SMART is a really, really good way to put that together. So if you have a list of the smaller goals that you need to accomplish by when, the time bound is so important, because otherwise it's just a dream. So if you have that going for you and you start to tick those off on a sheet of paper that you're doing them, you're achieving them by the timing that you're looking at, you're going to notice two things. Number one, you're going to feel really, really accomplished. And number two, things are going to be happening because you feel that way. And it will move you on to bigger and better things towards, okay, time to go for that moonshot goal.
Absolutely. And of course, when you start putting together your goals and writing them down and actually thinking about how to accomplish them, those goals are going to naturally create more goals. Some smaller as a part of a big goal, maybe some bigger. I always use the example of losing weight because so many people can identify with that. But if you have a goal to lose weight, let's say you want to lose 20 pounds. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, it starts with diet and exercise. So now you're going to be changing your diet. So you now have a new goal. I want to change my diet. Okay, so how are you going to do that? I'm going to remove snacking from my diet. I'm going to add more vegetables each day. These become small goals that will get you to the big one. I'm going to exercise more. Okay, how often are you going to exercise? My goal is to exercise 4 times a week. What are you going to do? I'm going to walk a mile. Okay, maybe I'm not in shape enough to walk a mile. So I'm going to start with walking a quarter of a mile. And then next week, I'm going to walk a little further. So the goals tend to create more goals when you figure out all of them and you put them together. They become the process. They become all of the steps that you are taking to get to your goal. And then when you get to that 20, I've lost the 20 pounds. That was the initial goal. Maybe, you know what? I feel so much better than I did. I'm going to keep going. And it creates a larger goal. So you have to be flexible, start with those obvious goals, and then see where they lead you, both smaller and larger. And by putting that all together, you're actually building the life that you want to live.
Yep. And again, getting back to it, you're doing it one moment at a time, one daily habit at a time. And if you turn that habit into a daily routine, and then that routine helps you to keep that momentum going, you basically can conquer anything you want. But I mean, as you mentioned, if you want to lose weight, you're not just going to, okay, I'm not eating for 10 days and you expect to lose weight. But if you get up and you change a few of your habits, like from snacking to maybe eating fruit or being healthy and so on and so forth. If you develop a daily habit of saying, I'm going to walk, but instead you wake up first thing in the morning and you take that walk first thing in the morning so it's done, that's going to help out a whole lot also. And once you got a couple of things going for yourself, uh, you have the momentum going. I mean, you and I have talked many times about starting every day with a positive morning routine. And a lot of these new habits that you are starting to get into, if you can incorporate them and get them done in the day, at the beginning of the day, it's basically the tip from the book, Eat That Frog. Whatever these things are, that's your biggest obstacle that you really can't accomplish, that you don't think you can. If you start doing that as a daily habit, those frogs are going to become something that you really, really like to eat rather than bad habits. And then you'll be able to tackle another frog. And as we have said, you will be building momentum because all of a sudden, when you track at the end of the year and you have everything written down and seen everything that has happened, even knowing that you're going to have your bad days too, you have that to go back on and say, hey, look, the trend is very, very, very positive. Life is always going to be a series of ups and downs. But if you look at what you're accomplishing, it will definitely keep you going. You got positive momentum that you can turn back to at any point in time. All you got to do is put your mind to it.
Yes, that momentum is so important. And so is, it motivates you. And one of the things that tends to hold people back is over analyzing their goals. And I'm not talking about analysis paralysis, where you're so focused on figuring them out that you don't get started. I'm talking about after getting started, over measuring and getting disappointed in results. People tend to want instant gratification. So they expect to see results immediately, and that doesn't happen. So while it's important to be able to measure what you've achieved, it's also important not to overmeasure. And again, using weight loss as an example, you don't want to be weighing yourself every morning. If you have, if your financial goals, you don't want to be tracking the stock market every day. These things waver, they go up, they go down. You need to follow what the trend is. So if you're measuring, say, once a week, you'll see, oh, I lost 2 pounds this week. Now, maybe the next week you only lose a pound. Maybe the following week you gain a pound back. That's fine. Everybody thinks achieving the movement to achieve your goal is going to be a straight line. It rarely is. Very often it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You can't let that discourage you. The one thing to remember as you're moving forward and as you're working towards these goals is that progress is more important than perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. When I did mention the areas of your life, one of the ones that I mentioned was personal development. And if you can get into a personal development practice and set a goal to do this and work daily towards doing this, developing and maintaining a positive mindset, plain and simple. There are tools for doing that. And at every single present moment, you have the choice to act positively or negatively towards things. And if you can work on your own personal development, setting that positive thing for yourself, it's so important to do that. And all that is just realizing, number one, that you can do that. So choose positivity, be grateful for things, come up with a gratitude practice, go out there and help people out, consciously appreciate other people, throw out all the negatives in your life, criticizing, complaining, and so on and so forth. These things that you do to protect your own identity because you're imperfect and therefore everybody else is, and you have to emphasize that to yourself. That's not the way that we were created. We all came from good. And as soon as you can throw that out and take out that list and look at all the great things that you're doing once you start this program, it'll become crystal clear. And obviously, you can help other people do that too. We've talked several times about the courtroom in our own minds, where we are basically convicting ourselves for doing wrong, and the judge is there. We're the judge, we're the accused, but there's no jury there because they're all in their courtrooms doing the same thing.
Yeah, and that positivity is a matter of perspective. And if you really think about things, when you start to complain about something, think about why you're complaining about this. And I actually had this conversation not that long ago. Someone was complaining because they went to a grocery store. They went to the supermarket and there were no cashiers. It was all self checkout. And they were complaining about having to self checkout. And I pointed out to them here, when you grow up in America, you have access to a greater variety of food than anywhere else in the world. You didn't have to grow and harvest the fruits and vegetables. You didn't have to hunt and raise cattle. You didn't have to slaughter the meat and butcher it yourself. You walked in, you pulled it off a shelf. And not only do you have a great variety of choices that you can get, the fact that you're buying it means you have the capability of affording it, which so many people don't have. So, with all of that going for you, you're complaining about having to scan the items? Think about all of the things that you take for granted. And putting it in a positive perspective, thinking about all of the things that are going in your favor. I often point out, people complain about lack, but even the poorest person in America is in the top 1% financially globally. So you have to look at these things as, yes, look at everything that I have, whether it was something you earned or something that was given to you. And now turn those into your goals to make your life better. And focus on better, not perfect. Again, progress is better than perfection. It's more important. When you keep moving forward, you can make your life better with your goals. You can make your family's life better, your friends' life better, your community better. And that's what these goals are for. It's to improve your well-being and the well-being of those around you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk about my formula for happiness and success: purpose, passion, positivity, and a plan. Those are the 4 P's. The 5th P is the most important one. And you mentioned it. That's perspective. And that's how you look at things. Do you look at things based upon all the outside influences that are around you and so on and so forth, and you're brain dead and you let that control your life? Like the line in the cash in the checkout line, or not being able to check out, doing it yourself and that kind of thing. The bottom line is if you go into your heart, into your source, and you dig deep and you realize perspective wise where you are, as you said, as opposed to everybody else, suddenly you can change. If you can black out your mind, take that deep breath, and really look into your true self and everybody's true self, where we all come from, which is, call it love or whatever you want to call it, but it's that feeling where we are here to appreciate each other, help each other, because we all are from the same source. That is something, once you put things in that perspective, again, you're going to have your slips and so on and so forth. But if you look at things that way before you respond to life's events, it's going to do you a world of good. And obviously, if you are setting your goals from that perspective and you're operating on a daily basis as far as forming habits, it's going to do you a whole world of good. So perspective is really, really important. And that's how you look at things. And if you can work on that person in the mirror, number one, appreciate that person in the mirror, because the coolest person is there and the source totally appreciates you. And then just go from there and just be the best person that you can possibly be with all your talents, all your uniqueness, because there's only one you. That's a big key. And if you write that down as far as your accomplishments for your goals, you will see positive things happening. And I'm not talking about being arrogant and selfish. You will feel that from your heart, because that's where it's coming from.
And yes, and we've talked a lot today about achieving those goals and how to make it easier to get there. But the fact of the matter is, there is another reason that a lot of people fail to achieve their goals. And this is the question of why. Why are you setting that goal? And it's something, when you're setting the goal, you need to pay attention to. Because if it's not a why that motivates you, you're not going to achieve the goal. If you know, and again, I'm using the weight loss example. If you make that choice and you make the goal to lose weight, why are you doing it? Is it because you want to look better for an event? That motivates a lot of people. Is it for health reasons? That motivates people. But if you're setting the goal just because it sounds like a good goal to have, that's not going to motivate you. And you'll tend to give up on those goals. So when you sit down and you write your goals down, ask yourself, why am I setting this goal? Is it really important to me? If it's not important to you, you're probably going to give up on it before you achieve it. So make sure your goals matter to you and figure out what it is that you really want from them. Right? We are just about at the end of our time. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, I love your last statement, which basically is make goals your goals, not the goals of others based upon outside influences. And I do this and that. Make your goals from your heart. Look at how you do things. Realize there is no book out there of all the ifs and thens as far as how things are going to happen. Big leaps are not going to happen, but in the present moment, if you make a list, if you start developing a daily habit of what you're looking to accomplish, turn that into a routine and build momentum, and then reach for more, that's the way to do it. It's a process, but if you can start that right now, one little step at a time, start writing and make it happen. And by the new year, you'll be saying, wow, I already accomplished this.
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is take those small steps, but don't underestimate how much you can accomplish. Those moonshot goals are there for a reason. They're there to push you. And good goals, while they should be achievable, should also make you stretch and make you work a little bit to achieve them. And they should be a little scary. Maybe you won't get there, but maybe you will. And if you don't underestimate yourself, and if you put in the time to do it right, you'll be amazed at how much more you can accomplish. And once you achieve those moonshot goals, where can you go next? The future has to be written by you, and you get to decide what you accomplish. And I think that's the most important thing, at least for me, for people to remember. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode of Success Showcase at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.